I used to work on the North Slope of Alaska in the oil industry. The work we were doing required us to travel far out into the petroleum reserve, which is basically just untamed tundra wilderness for hundreds of miles. The oil companies would build these long ice roads in the winter that would lead to exploration drilling pads. Our job was to go out after they finished the initial drilling and test rock formations for the oil production qualities. It was mid-January. The sun hadn't quite come up yet. And when I say the sun hadn't come up, I mean in almost a month and a half. Polar nights are intense. The particular well site we were travelling to was about 60 miles west of Alpine, Alaska, deep in the wilderness. Our job took a week, but we finished and we're headed back to camp to finish our hitch and go home. At the beginning and end of the ice roads are guard shacks that you have to check in and out of for safety. No cell reception and radios work, only up to a distance. If you don't check in or out at a set time, they come looking for you to ensure you're not a popsicle. It was about 4 a.m, not that it mattered in a land of endless night, and we were halfway across the ice road. Travel was slow as the speed limit on the roads is only 25 miles per hour, when something appeared on the road in our headlights. It was a man in jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie jacket, walking down an ice road in wilderness tundra at 4 a.m, and it was minus 20 degrees outside. It's not unusual for the local Inuit people to be out this far hunting. Maybe his snowmobile broke down and he's trying to get back to the guard shack. It seemed plausible. He didn't acknowledge us as our trucks rolled up next to him. He just kept shuffling forward. He didn't seem cold. His clothing, while totally not appropriate for the extreme weather, appeared warm and dry. We also noticed that he wasn't Inuit, but Caucasian. I rolled down my window and asked if he needed any help and if he was okay. He still didn't acknowledge us, just kept shuffling forward. His face was completely blank, devoid of any thought or emotions. The other guys in my truck suggested that maybe he was in an accident and in shock. I continued rolling my truck alongside him as he trudged down the road, still trying to get his attention. Even in this extreme cold, I could occasionally get whiffs of a peculiar smell coming off him. He smelled acidic, if that makes sense. There was just a lot about this guy that made the hair on my neck stand up. The guy behind me in the truck's crew cab had had enough of all this. He rolled down his window and reached out to grab the guy. He later said he was just going to try and shake him out of his stupor. Before my buddy's hand could reach him though, this walking popsicle spun around and latched onto my buddy's outstretched arm. He glared at my buddy and then at me, with this look of pure rage, not removing his hand from his arm. If emotions had a physical temperature, this guy could have melted the entire tundra that night. My buddy groaned in pain as he tried to get his arm free from Mr. Popsicle. At that moment, this guy starts screaming in our faces. There was so much hate and rage and anger in that scream. It was absolutely terrifying. I slammed on the gas and spun out on the ice for a second before the wheels caught and launched us forward. Popsicle Dude still had a hold of my buddy's arm and was trying to pull him out of the truck. He was running along the side of the truck while the other guys in the cab held onto my buddy to keep him inside. After several moments, my buddy tore free from this guy and we hauled ass to the guard shack another 30 miles down the road. We checked in with the guards and reported what we had just seen. The guard was looking at us like we were pulling a prank, but policy said they had to check it out regardless. My buddy's arm was sore, and when he pulled back his sleeve, there were noticeable bruises in the shape of a hand around his arm. We filed a report with the guard and were told not to head back to our camp. None of us really wanted to talk about what happened, and it was a quiet drive the rest of the way. We flew home the next day. The next time we saw this guard at the shack, we asked him if they ever saw Mr. Popsicle on his patrols. He told us they searched up and down the ice road for a solid 12-hour shift and saw nothing, not even tracks in the snow leading off the road. He told us it was a good prank and that he'd get us back for making him waste a shift driving around. But it wasn't a prank. Who would make up a story like that? And who would willingly bruise their arm for a dumb prank? We never got a satisfying answer to what happened that evening. I still wonder about that dude. If he even was a dude. The Alaskan tundra is a weird place, and that was just one of my many weird stories from my time up there. It was March on the slope, while still in the depths of the Arctic winter. With the equinox approaching, the day-night cycle was becoming more even. My flight to the slope was delayed due to a large blizzard which shut down the airstrips. I spent 3 days waiting in Anchorage until the storm cleared and we were able to fly. Landing at the Cooperuk airstrip, it was evident the blizzard was more severe than we had initially thought. While whiteout blizzards are common, actually snow accumulation is not. This storm, though, was a monster. Snowdrifts, several stories tall, ran up against the camp housing. Our work trucks and equipment were completely covered in snow, and it took a full day of digging to get them out. As soon as the trucks were free, we were off to our first job assignment. No time to rest in the oil field. Travelling anywhere after a storm this size is a nightmare. To get to the worksite, we had a bulldozer escort us, breaking up any remaining drifts as we went. The dozer cleared our work area around the well house and we began to rig up our equipment. It took little time and soon we were back to the normal humdrum of life, Arctic oil well maintenance. Over the radio, we got a call from the bulldozer operator as he left that he had seen a giant black animal headed in our direction. He couldn't tell if it was a wolf or a big dog, but it was massive and moving erratically. In the winter, many animals aren't active on the slope. Caribou, musk oxen and foxes are the usual wildlife you'll encounter out in the snow. The animals keep to themselves for the most part, but you learn very quickly to never look the animals in the eyes if they approach you. This also goes for white foxes, and I advise you to do the same. The grizzlies are hibernating. The male polar bears are hunting on the sea ice, while the females are denned up with the new cubs. Wolves aren't unheard of, but rarely leave the Brooks Range Mountains a couple 100 miles to the south. Whatever the operator saw, we would keep watch, but it wasn't our problem. It was a problem for the bear police. We went about our work, albeit cautiously. It's interesting to note that oil companies on the slope have private security officers who, besides being private law enforcement, also try to minimise encounters with wildlife. We referred to them as the bear police, which is a cute name for a rather dangerous part of their job. These security officers are not the only personnel on the North Slope, outside regular law enforcement, that can carry firearms. Their primary job, when encountering large predators, is to harass them until they leave. This is done with beanbag guns or loud noises at first. When that fails, or the animal is unusually aggressive, lethal force is needed. We had settled into our work and forgot about the wolf or dog or whatever it was. I needed to take a leak. I got out of the truck and walked behind the well house to take care of business. My crewmate came over the radio telling me to get back in the truck. There was a wolf coming out from behind the well house where I had just been, and he was pacing after me. I didn't look behind me. I just ran back and jumped into the truck. I'm not taking any chances, even if it was a crewmate practical joke. Once inside, I looked out, and sure enough, trotting towards the truck, was a large, black, male wolf. He approached our trucks and plopped down on the snow in front of us. This wolf looked rough, even by wild animal standards. The right side of his face was mutilated and deformed, missing his right eye and most of his skin and lips on that side of his head. The wound exposed large white teeth, giving him the appearance of a wide, crooked smile. He didn't appear aggressive, but he didn't take his good eye off of us. That one good eye was bright red in appearance. It was eerie. The way he sat there staring, watching, and waiting. We radioed the security officers for help, and like a speeding bullet, they showed up 40 minutes later. The whole time waiting, the wolf never diverted his attention from us. If I hadn't seen him breathing, I would have assumed he was a statue. The security officers arrived and took some pictures for their reports, then began the process of driving the animal back out into the tundra. Truck horns didn't startle him. He didn't even flinch. Charging him with their truck did nothing either. They then took aim with a beanbag gun and hit him square in the ribs. The wolf let out a yelp, but didn't get up or move from his spot. The next beanbag hit him in the head, and that jolted him enough to get him up and leave. Security told us to call back if we saw the wolf again. They seemed confident he would move on and not be a bother anymore. The sun was setting and our job was still hours from wrapping up. Working a 13 to 15 hour day isn't unusual. You either get used to the long hours or you find another line of work pretty quick. I was running the computer equipment inside the truck and weird data was coming back from the tools down in the well. They were blanking out and losing signal. Or they were reporting data backwards, but diagnostics wasn't indicating any issues. Everything was operating normally. I tried a few different things to fix the issue, but it persisted. One of the workers went out into the wellhead to check out the gauges and cables, trying to isolate the problem from there. He was outside for not more than 5 minutes before the night was pierced by a long, bellowing howl. This was immediately followed by the high-pitched shriek of our crewmate. Throwing the door open, I was able to catch a fleeting glimpse of a large, dark figure running behind the well house. Our crewmate ran past us and jumped inside, pale, sweating and full of adrenaline. He tried to relay what had just happened. Through his panting, he said he was in the well house checking the cables when someone walked up behind him. Thinking it was one of us, he started a conversation with his back turned. When he got no reply, he turned and was met face to face with a 7-foot-tall black wolf standing on his hind legs. It stood between him and the door, growling. Without thinking, he flung his pipe wrench at the beast and struck him hard in the chest. That's when it let out a howl and ran off. Our crewmate was adamant this was the same wolf from earlier because its face was mangled in that crooked half smile and had one fiery red eye. Myself and the others on the crew had a hard time believing he saw a giant wolf man. We had no doubt he saw the wolf, but we reasoned that in his panic he hallucinated that it was upright like a man. But we'd all encountered enough weird things on the slope to never count out the impossible. We radioed the security officers and told them the wolf had returned and waited inside the truck. What else could we do but wait? I wasn't about to go out there and fight Satan's guard dog with a clipboard and a mouse pad. Every time we felt like things settled down outside, we would hear a growl or something would push against the truck. Periodically, we could see something pacing in the dark just beyond the reach of the work lights. Even though we were inside a locked truck cabin, it was still a very vulnerable feeling. We were very much trapped. I'm sure it felt similar to what divers experience inside a shark cage far out at sea. All of this went on for an hour while we waited for someone to show up. Finally coming up the road, we could see headlights of 3 approaching vehicles. The security team had showed up, this time with actual rifles. Over the radio, we told them what had been going on. You could feel their disbelief and eyes rolling through the radio. That sass and disbelief soon faded when we explored the worksite and found it covered in fresh, large wolf tracks. The security team split up with 2 trucks headed out to search for the wolf, while the last one remained with us as we loaded our equipment and finished our job. We didn't hear or see anything else that night as we cleaned up, but we sure did keep our heads on a swivel. The security officers didn't find the wolf that night. A set of tracks left off the worksite and out into the open tundra. The officers commented that the tracks looked weird. This was due to them only seeing the back paw prints in the snow. The last security truck escorted us back to the main camp, while the others continued their search into the night. For the following week, various reports came in across the oil field of people seeing this mangled black wolf during the day, and at night, reports kept coming in of a black beast walking upright and harassing or cornering workers. Security seemed to always show up minutes too late. During this time frame, many of the Alaska Native workers were getting nervous. One of our friends in the camp workshop, he told us it sounded exactly like an istock, a shape-shifting creature that can take the form of any Arctic animal while it hunts. He said it was obvious, as the wolf was a normal, albeit deformed animal in the daylight, but transformed into an upright monster after nightfall. The istock are thought to be Inuit hunters that travelled too far north and became stuck between the world of the living and the dead. They transformed into evil, deformed men with sideways mouths and eyes They use their power of shapeshifting to hunt other Inuit, especially children. The Inupiat are weary of wild animals for this very reason. A week following our encounter, the security team was able to corner the wolf on a remote worksite. It had attacked and trapped 2 welders in their truck. Both workers had superficial cuts through their snowsuits, but were fine otherwise. Having no other choice, the wolf was euthanized on the spot. Security shot the wolf once, and instead of dropping dead, it charged the officer that shot it. The wolf took 3 more high-powered rifle shots before it eventually collapsed at the feet of the officer. Even then, paralysed in the now crimson snow, the wolf was still growling through its crooked, wide smile. After several minutes, it finally succumbed to its wounds. The wolf's body was taken to the University of Alaska Fairbanks for the dissection and examination. Outside of the facial deformities and gnarled appearance, the biologist concluded it was an ordinary wolf from the Brooks Range mountain. How he got hundreds of miles from home and why it stayed on the tundra is a complete mystery.